So we've all been there. It's our first backpacking trip and we get out into the woods and we realize we forgot gear, or we didn't bring enough food, or we didn't realize what it meant to get water when you're on the trail. There's a lot of things that we do when we get out on those first backpacking trips and we make mistakes. And today, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the 7 mistakes that beginner backpackers make when they get out on the trail. So let's kick it right off with number 1. The first thing that backpackers almost inevitably do on their first trip is they overpack. And I mean, they overpack. I took a friend of mine out to the Red River Gorge a couple years ago, and he brought 5 peanut butter sandwiches for an overnight trip in case he got hungry for snacks. He brought an extra change of clothing. He brought all this extra stuff that he just didn't need, adding 10 to 15 pounds to his pack that he didn't need to bring with him. So before we left on the trip, I made sure that I got together with him and we put some of those peanut butter sandwiches away and we took some of those clothes and left them behind. The truth is, the only clothes you need for an overnight trip typically, and this was in August, is the clothes you're hiking in and the clothes you're sleeping in. That's it. You put those other clothes back on the next day. You don't need to bring all this extra weight. I've seen people bring entire boxes of batteries. I've seen people bring enough food for a family of 12. I've seen people bring a gallon jug of water and strap it to their backpack. There are so many different ways that people overpack, and that is always something you want to avoid when you go backpacking. You don't want to overpack because overpacking means your pack is going to be overweight. That's going to make it a lot harder to hike, and it's going to make the trip not as much fun. And if you're just getting into backpacking, you want those first few trips to really be fun so that you can enjoy it and want to do it again. Number 2 on this list is not taking care of your feet. And if you've watched this channel enough, you know that that's something that's important to me. One of the biggest things that beginner backpackers and beginner hikers struggle with is understanding that when you get a hot spot, stop everything, take your shoe off, treat the hot spot, and then continue with your hike. It might take a few minutes to do, but those few minutes are gonna save you miles of pain. Once that hot spot comes in, that's your warning that there's a blister coming shortly. And if you don't stop and treat that immediately with some form of a Leuko tape or a KT tape, or even in the Boy Scouts, they use duct tape, something to put over top of that hot spot to protect it when you're hiking so that it doesn't get rubbed into a blister. Blisters are painful, they're miserable, and they make hiking miserable. So make sure you take care of your feet when you're on the trail. Number 3 on the list is not hydrating properly. And this is a big struggle for new backpackers, especially if they've been hiking a lot of day hikes in the past. I know for me, I started out day hiking. I would do 5, 6, even 10-mile day hikes. And I would drink maybe one of these or a 20-ounce version of these, and that's all I would drink for the hike because I knew when I got off the trail I could get water at the truck, or we could drive to a gas station and get something to drink. We were almost always going out for food afterwards, so there was plenty to drink afterwards. But when you are backpacking, if you don't hydrate enough, you're not getting in your car at the end of the day. You're not driving to a gas station at the end of the day. You're going to a campsite. And so you've got to make sure you have enough water to drink, to hydrate food, and quite possibly to make it the next day, depending on where your water sources are. Now, there are several ways that you can go about doing this. One popular way to carry less weight is to go ahead and camel up. What that means is when you get to a water source, drink 1 or 2 liters of water right there at the source so that you're fully hydrated as you're hiking. That also means you don't have to carry as much water weight with you when you're hiking, which does help out a little bit. One of the things I've learned though is when I camel up like that, I end up going to the bathroom like 80 times between then and when I get to my campsite. So I don't know if the water is actually hydrating me or if it's just going straight through my system, but that's one of the options. Another option is fill up everything with water. When you know there's not going to be a water source, sometimes you want to fill your bladder, you want to fill your water bottles, and you want to go. What this does is it just guarantees that you're not going to be stuck in case there's no water source for a while when you get to camp or the next day. And hydration is very important, especially in the summertime. You can get heat exhaustion, even heat stroke. Dehydration will give you headaches and it can make you super sick. So make sure you're hydrating well. And even in cold weather, Don't neglect drinking water in cold weather. We get out there in the cold weather and we start to think that because it's cold, we're not sweating as much, and so we're not using all that water, so we don't have to drink as much, but it's the exact opposite. We are using that water, and you can dehydrate in the cold. I have a lot of friends I've backpacked with in the cold, and they start getting headaches, and they realize they haven't been drinking water on the hike. It's so important that you hydrate when you're backpacking or hiking, because if you do, it's gonna make your trip better, and if you don't, it could make your trip disastrous. Number 4 on this list is not knowing your hiking ability. Don't overestimate what you can do when you first start backpacking. I remember my first 12-mile day, and I remember just how beat up I was. I wasn't ready for it. I had done a couple 2 and 3 mile things, but I had never hiked 12 miles in my life, and I'd never done it with a backpack on full of gear. By the end of that day, I was exhausted, I was miserable, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt, my muscles were sore. My body wasn't trained up for that, and I wasn't ready for it, and it made that trip miserable. It's very important that you understand what you're capable of doing. If you're a beginner backpacker, for your first trip, just go like 2 or 3 miles into the woods to a campsite. Camp out. It gives you a chance to try out all your gear, and you've got a good escape plan because it's only an hour and a half walk back to your car. So make sure when you get started in backpacking, you don't overestimate what you're capable of when you go out. Take it easy those first few trips and build up to those longer miles and those longer days and multiple days when you go backpacking. But don't try and do it all at first. Number 5 on this list is poor planning or under planning. Basically, it means you just aren't prepared for where you're going and you're just winging it. If there's one thing you don't want to do when you're a beginner backpacker, it's wing it. You want to make sure as a beginner backpacker, you're planning even harder than you do as an experienced backpacker. When I first got into backpacking, I knew that I didn't know anything. And so I had a checklist for every little thing that I was going to be taking on my backpacking trips because I didn't want to get out there and realize I didn't have the gear I needed, I didn't have the food I needed, I didn't have the capability to filter water. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't that guy who was doing that when I got out into the backcountry. What I didn't think about a lot of times though was planning the hike itself. That is so important that you do that. I can't tell you how many times when I've been out in the Red River Gorge and I've seen people who are out there hiking a trail and you ask them where they're going, like, I don't know, I'm just gonna kind of hike around. A lot of those people get lost and it's hours before they get back to their car. And if they're backpacking, it can be even worse. I remember not planning well for a hike in the Red River Gorge one time and hiking out from one end to the other when it was supposed to be a loop. I took a simple wrong turn, and instead of ending up coming back to where I started, I ended up on the opposite side of the gorge. We couldn't hike back because my buddy hurt his ankle, so we ended up hitching a ride to get back to our cars. I ended up having to pay like $10 to some lady at a gas station to get us back to our vehicle so we could come home. And it was because I didn't have a map, I didn't have any kind of GPS with me. I had nothing because I wasn't prepared, and because of that, a friend of mine got injured and it could have ended up a whole lot worse than it was. If you want to instill confidence in yourself, plan. Don't go in there without a plan. Don't try and wing it. You're really risking the opportunity to get lost, to get injured, and to have to seek rescue. And there's nothing more embarrassing than having to seek a rescue. Now, before we get to the last 2 mistakes that beginner backpackers make, I want to say a huge thank you to the sponsor for today's video, and that is Vaunt. They're making smart electronics to simplify your life, and I want to talk a little bit about one of their products called the Ultimate Survival Kit. It comes with 2 headlamps, 2 flashlights, and 2 lanterns. The headlamp is their Spark headlamp. This is a great headlamp that's very easy to use. You can see when you click on it, if it's in red lamp mode, you've got your red light. It's got 2 separate blinking functions for that. If you hold that button down, it then becomes your white light with multiple brightnesses as well as a strobe for that as well. I have a lot of friends who use these. They love this headlamp. It's 1 button. very simple use. It runs on AAA batteries, weighs only a few ounces, and you get 2 of these. Not only do you get 2 of these, but you get 2 of the Blaze flashlights. I'm a big fan of the fact that it's an all-metal construction, but also I'm a big fan of the fact that you can really focus that beam. As you can see, you can focus it down to a small beam, or you can make it a floodlight. It's a great little flashlight that you can use. It comes with a belt clip to put it in. So if you're somebody who carries a flashlight with you every day to work, this is a great option. You get 2 of these, and you get 2 of these lanterns. These are the Vaunt LED lanterns. Very simple use. You just pull it up. You've got a nice LED lantern. It's not very heavy, and you can just set this on a picnic table. You can hang it in a camper. You could put it inside your tent. I would say this probably isn't a backpacking lantern, but it's definitely something you could take in car camping. If you're going in a camper or something, these are fantastic. You're gonna get 2 of these. You're gonna get 2 headlamps, and you're gonna get 2 flashlights for a total price of $43.15 on Amazon. And if you use the code J10Kelly, you're also going to get another 10% off of that. So 2 headlamps, 2 flashlights, 2 lanterns. If you're a beginner and you're just getting into backpacking, this is a great way to get some gear that you can use in the outdoors and not have to break the bank to do it. So thank you, Vaunt, for sponsoring this video. The number 6 thing that is a mistake that beginners do is they have no bailout plan. Now, what a bailout plan is when you get into a backpacking trip and you get so far and you get injured, or you run out of food, you start to feel dehydrated, you're feeling sick, your body gives out, whatever it is, and you just can't keep going in the hike, it's always smart to have a plan to where you can get off the trail and be picked up by somebody. A lot of people don't plan this, and a lot of people have been hurt over the years because of it. So make sure you plan a bailout plan whenever you go on a backpacking trip. It's vital, not just for you, but for the people you're backpacking with, because if one of them gets hurt, if you're able to provide a bailout for them to get them off the trail and to where they need to be, you're gonna be the most beloved person in your group. So always have that bailout plan. And the 7th and final thing, the final mistake that beginner backpackers do is they don't practice leave no trace philosophies. Now, I'm not gonna go through every one of the leave no trace philosophies. I am putting a link in the description below so you can go to the Leave No Trace website and read all about this. And if you are a beginner backpacker and you've never heard about leave no trace, please go to that website and read through all of it. It's basically the way that we as backpackers can prevent our backcountry from being destroyed because of our use. It's leaving the backcountry the way we found it. Not going into places where we're not supposed to camp and making fire rings and tearing up the ground. It's all about not leaving your trash at your campsite. It's about not leaving your fire burning when you leave your campsite. Always make sure you practice leave no trace philosophies when you get out into the backcountry. And if you're a beginner, you may have never heard of this before. So let me tell you, learn them. Learn them quickly. Go to that website, find out what leave no trace is, and begin practicing that right now. That's gonna be such a great way for you to learn proper etiquette when you're out backpacking. So what about you? What are some major mistakes that you see beginner backpackers making when they go out into the backcountry? What are the mistakes that you made when you were a beginner backpacker? Leave those in the comments below. If you haven't already, check me out on Instagram, where you can find out about my trips and the Backpacking Podcast. And until next time, stay strong, hike long, and I'll catch you on the next go-around.